Plan. This model here is the mould of a lifeboat of my steamer Dufferin. It has the waterline marked on it as it was built, and it will serve as a model for our purpose. We needed a flat surface to work from. This is a ground flat surface plate which I use for my machining jobs. It's perfect for what we want on this, and it's dead flat, and the first operation we do is to mark a centerline on this model, and the centerline I'm talking about is here, and it's also over here. Now how we do that is to make a mark on the bow and the stern, right up here. That's easy enough. The stern, of course, with a canoe stern like this, it's easy. With a transom stern, you have to figure it out, make a measurement. And of course that then is transferred over to this side, there and there. Now we can take an accurate square. This is what I use on the milling machine for doing metal work, but this is a 3-inch cast iron, flat and parallel and everything else. That's a perfect thing for this job. And then we set this up like this on its side. I'm sorry, backwards this way, and then we we clamp it in place. And now we can mark this height on either end using this tool, which is a surface gauge with a pencil with a very sharp point. And that is a line to make sure this is exactly the same height on either end. Well, that's pretty close. And then that line is then scribed on there. Been done before, you can see what I've done here. And then of course we turn it around, and then we do it here on this way. And that will give us a center line which can give us our profile in elevation. Other tool we can use here is a height gauge, and that's a regular machinist height gauge, and this of course is we can measure it exactly, but we don't really need the accuracy of a height gauge, so the surface gauge is quite adequate. The next thing to do is take a piece of fiberboard or flat material around about 1/2 inch thick, and make this about 1 inch wider than the beam and a little bit longer, and machine and cut these on your table saw absolutely parallel, and face off the cut off these, square off these ends exactly 90 degrees to that, and then put on there a center line accurately. Attached to that base we just made, and the center line lines up the model and the base, and make sure that the water line now is parallel to this line, this surface, and also it's now this is what's known as the baseline here, the datum. This is the datum. So all dimensions now are taken from that datum to these points on the that we're going to measure. So that gives us a basic datum line, which is so important for the measuring, taking these measurements. Now the water lines are marked. This gadget, we can adjust the height of that little scriber. There it is there, that pencil is very sharp, and we just run that around the model all the way to the bow, and there's your waterline, the first waterline, and we can just put as many as we require. We'll probably put another one in here, and maybe another one here, or maybe another one there, depending. Now the spacing of those lines is not very critical as long as we mark our plan, which we are now preparing on the drawing board. Well, we're creating our new lines plan, and that will depict all of this stuff. We draw that exactly to scale with the datums on it and the vertical lines and all this kind of stuff here. And now we're going to mark off these things here. We're going to do that the same way, but we need a little bit more equipment. This is another angle plate, cast iron angle plate, and that will serve to mount this thing absolutely vertical on there, and that can be used then to mark our sections or stations. Now we better mark off, make sure that center line on there is absolutely square. I'm using this beat up old Stanley square which somebody left out in the garden. It got rusty, but anyway it works just fine for what we want. So that's dead square. That's why it's important to get that at exactly 90 degrees. And now we bring in our surface gauge, and we can adjust that height to our station line, and we can just run that around the same way we did for the water lines. We only need to do this on one side, of course. We'll do another one. Let's move this about so you can see that more clearly. There's one there. Quite simple, really, isn't it? And again, the spacing again of these is not exactly critical, but it's a good idea to keep them pretty good. And that's where a height gauge really would be helpful. And in fact, I did mark these lines with a height gauge. And they're all exactly, they're an inch apart. Now they're an inch apart this way, but of course not this way, because this line is moving away, so this is actually longer. But the spacing between them, as far as the XY dimensions, are exactly the same. Now I didn't mention it at the time when I was marking those, but I actually also mark these lines here, which line up with these, of course. And they will give us the point where we have to bring on our angle piece where we're going to make our measurement from. So we bring up our angle piece up here to this line, and that is vertical, and this will then be in this plane of this section, and this is where we take our measurements. And this is to the water line, and this one with the water line number 1, whatever it is, or any of the water lines we take. So we make measurements of that, and we just move that around and do this for every one. Now let's actually show you how I've been doing these measurements. And I'm using a digital caliper. These are available quite cheaply now. You can buy these at Canadian Tire for about 20 bucks, I think, something like, even cheaper than that from some of these outfits. But particularly notice this thing is used as a depth gauge, which is the same reading that you get there on that side of the machine. Now that thing is used now to make that measurement we're talking about. We put this on there, line it up. That's the water line now, and I go down there until that is exactly to that point, and there's our measurement. Now I just forgot to turn this thing on, but there it is. Let's do it again. So bring that out in line with that. Now I have to space it a little bit further back because of the offset of the thing, but there's the measurement. Line that up. Right. And there it is, there's that dimension. Again, we go to the next one. Same thing, from that face to that, and make sure we're right up to our datum. This is our datum. So go on like that for all the sections and put those on our drawing. Using the same technique, bringing this up, this has been set now with an angle piece here, so this is vertical, and this has been brought up to there, and we measure now, we measure to the base. There we go. This is to the base, and there's that dimension right there. Similarly, the base on that one, of course, we measure the shear, and the shear line just measured from the shear line to the base, and there's that measurement there. So those get put on. We do that the same for each one all the way around, and then we will have a profile of the elevation of the hull that way, and also the shear. Now, don't forget, this is to the chine. The center line of the boat is different because there'll be a camber on the thing, and that has to be put on the lines drawing separately. We have to figure out how much camber there is on each section. That's easy enough to do. This is an example of a finished lines drawing. This might be a good reference for anybody that's really interested in this subject, because this is the book I use as a yacht designer. This is the beginning of creating a set of lines right from scratch. It shows what I've just been talking about. And this book is an extremely good one. It's called The Skeens Elements of Yacht Design. And it's there was an old fellow called Francis Kinney who wrote this many years ago, and this fellow, what's his name now? This fellow Kinney, I'm sorry, Skeen was the old guy originally. This guy Kinney is a designer from Sparkman & Stevens, one of the best design outfits in the United States. Anyway, it gives all the stuff. Now these lines, of course, will lead to, you can do your calculations of, it's all in this book, of buoyancy and stability and all that kind of thing. That's so much that can be gleaned from that. And one of the things I could talk about later on, but not now, is the what's called the how to find the stability of the boat, the angle it's going to heel over at when it's in a sailboat in the wind. So here we go. There's that thing again. All this has to be calculated. You have to calculate the areas of these and figure out how this is going to, when it rolls over, you have to do the whole thing all over again. It's really quite a complicated surface. And of course nowadays all these guys do them on a computer, I guess, makes it much easier, but the fundamentals are very interesting.